sure we have read our chapters in the sacred pipe that the ceremonies or the rites, as it's called, we have 7 of them that they practiced a long time ago. And it's a harsh time during the time when the Lakota people were roaming this prairie, and so they do need to have some kind of a survival thing for their physical being as well as their spiritual and emotionally. And so a lot of these ceremonies address that, the unity or the harmony that the Lakota people have. And so usually started with the spring ceremony, then they began to the fall, the sun dance, then into winter time, because when the winter comes in the fall they harvest and then get ready for the winter, and where every family scattered to their own favorite place to survive during the winter, and usually at the foothills of the Black Hills on the south side, where they would be protected through the harsh winter. Because a long time ago I heard the snow was deep. Winter was winter at that time, not the cold spell we have without any snow here at this present time, but it was harsh. And so in order for one to prepare themselves, they have to start with the spring, wetu, when the blood is become fresh and alive, and to everyone gather together at one place or certain areas, and to renew who they are, how they survive the winter, and how it's important that they practice those ceremonies that we have of a long time ago. And it's a continuous ritual, and that's what keeps them going throughout those times or throughout those years that they were living in this prairie or the land that they have. They have to understand the nature, the elements, and their surroundings. That's what makes them who they are, in both spiritually and physically and emotional. And because of the ceremonies that they have that give them that extra strength to survive whatever is in front of them. And they have ways of doing this. They have medicine men or shamans, as we call today, and to keep them intact throughout the winter. Because every Tioshpa have their own medicine man, and as each one scatters to their places, the medicine man is still there, and they really depended upon him in spirituality, and as well as the healing process or healing thing that the medicine man have at that time. And so, and today, we are so that we never really understood the medicine or the ceremony or the ceremonies that we have today that should imply who we are. And so we have ceremonies that we started out with was the receiving of the pipe, a sacred gift from a spiritual gift to the physical being. And from that, we do have other ceremonies that was supposed to be a vision or a dream of a certain people to continually keep us in a good way of life, because we need that in order for one to survive as a nation. And last time we talked about the keeping of the spirit and releasing of the spirit, how it's important that one remembers a relative and keeping that spirit for about 13 months. And after that, releasing of the spirit is when they are finished, fulfill their purpose of, keeping that the loved one with them for that long. And I know after releasing of the spirit, the rejoice is very tremendous, because they have to abide by certain protocols that was given, and their family is probably relieved, because they cannot do anything within themselves, so they have to depend on their relatives or the Tioshpaye to continually survive those months that they're keeping the spirit of that person. And so when releasing of the spirit, it is bring a proper understanding within themselves, and now they're free to do what is needed for their own survival as well, because the dependency on others is now, being fulfilled by their Tioshpaye. And so now they will continue, the family will continue into the social area or everyday living, and they have fulfilled their wishes of keeping that spirit. And I'm sure it's very important, that how the Tioshpaye come together to help them during that time. Washigala, or Washigala means it's something that you don't like or angry about. And usually it happens sometimes when you lost a loved one, the anger is there, and denial and whatever, and then you have to release it somehow. And the point of keeping of spirit is that all the things that inside you finally was relieved by the releasing of the spirit. So that was an important time of the year. Now they could continue with the sichung, or the memories of that person, and then continue. And basically what they're trying to do is what this person is like, and how this person reacts to the situation in their Tioshpaye, and they're trying to fulfill that in some way. Or sometimes if it's an elderly, the name will continue within that Tioshpaye, but the name will be given to a child that is born, and to continue that relationship with that person who went into the spirit world, and to the person who are just beginning his or her his life. And so the connection will always be there. And because of that, we always do that. A person, a loved one, grandfather, we usually give a name to another person that is born into this world. And so that continuation in relationship with the spirit world is always there. And the sichung, or the memory, is always there, and that's what keeps the Lakota family together and have strength from that. Because it's very hard, especially if it's an elder person who took all the knowledge that person shares into the spirit world. And now that Tioshpaye have to live a life that he dreamed of or had a vision of. And it's a struggle sometimes for individual or Tioshpaye to continue that kind of life from that person who went into the spirit world. And so these are the ceremonies that really helped a Tioshpaye how to remember and how to live without that person. But his like I said, sichung is the important part of that person's life, and so that should be continued into spirit life. Of course, if you're going to keep a spirit now, it's hard to do that. We have a lot of things that is in the modern times that it will be difficult for a person to do that. You have to stay home, and you have to do anything, but we keep watching that bottle of this, whatever it is that you use to keep the spirit in your home, and it's not an easy thing, and so there are also protocols for those who cannot do that. There are ways that you can do, like I think I mentioned it last time we met, is how a person could deal with the loss of a loved one in so many days, and then continue the way of life into the community or into the lives of the Teoshpai. And so it's important that we understand that, and I think today we try to do that. We at the end of the year we do a memorials dinner or giveaway, and this type of thing that it's something that each Teoshpai do today, and that's important, is that we remember the life and of that person who went into the spirit world. So that way the connection will be always there. And sometimes, we need a physical, and we need to know how to deal with the body of that person. And I'm sure in our readings of the creation story, it tells us how we could deal with that, so that physical body once was inhibited by that spirit of that person, still could make connection back into this world. If we dispose properly the body of that person, that connection will be always there. So sometimes they would come and then visit, and they went back in a good way. But if we were not doing what the proper way of dealing with that body, then the connection of that person back to the physical body would be broken, and it would be a hard life for that person who went into the spirit world. So it's important how we deal with the body of that person here in this world. Unjimanka, we need unjimanka to cover that person, and from that, something good would come out of it. Maybe in terms of a medicine or a plant or a flower, and that could be adorn unjimanka to the body or physical body of that person. And today it's very hard, I'm pretty sure. We have vaults and metal caskets that we put our loved ones in, and don't give them chance to mix with unjimanka after a period of time, Right. The cycle of life is stopped there. So, for instance, if you cremate yourself, then there's nothing there to make that connection with that spirit, Then the body that the spirit of that person enjoys, no matter what, it's not there anymore. And that person's spirit, as they journey into the spirit world, it will have difficult time because you have nothing to fall back on. How my physical body is there, that connection is always there. And I think that what holds the concept of a spiritual world with that person. Okay, we always, it's important to deal with that. And it's always this medicine man to, do those things for us, or how to deal with that. Because, the sorrow and the mourning process should be completed with evidence that the loved one is buried or properly dealt with here in this world, that that connection between that and the spiritual being would be intact. And that way, when the sichun, the memories would be good, But if we don't do that, the memories of that sichun or that person would not be as it was before, The connection is there. If the ashes or whatever that we did with our person, then, we'll come back to that. He was cremated, and that thought will still be in my mind, in confusion of the connection between the spirit world and to us and to that person would be as a proper way of dealing, So we do need to put our physical body into a place where, that connection is there. Now he's within Unchimaka. Unchimaka will use that person, the body physical, into good and useful things. But if it's not, then, we will feel somehow, and maybe we do something negative that we don't know about, and to deal with it. And so usually sometimes that really hard for a chioshpai, knowing that that person is not dealt with properly. And so that's why they have that keeping of the spirit, not to do that. But now after that they would, dispose of that, whatever they have in a spiritual sense of keeping that spirit, and then now it's over, and now it's time to live, to continue with the thought of that spirit, because they have done everything they could to keep that alive. And so understanding that, we sometimes we do it today. Even today we try to do it, but in a way that our way of dealing with that. We continue sometimes. We keep a part of that person and have a memorial service at the end of the year, and to continue our life once again, the wiping of tears, as they always say, that at that end of time, for all to know that this family could not continue and live and in a real way, or so to speak, And so those are important. And we have other ceremonies to also make that connection with that spirit that we have, like Inipi. Inipi is a real old ceremony, the beginning of time, and I'm sure in your reading you know how a lodge would be fixed. A lodge, what to do to keep in communication with our Creator and the spirits, and the elements that we use, that the rocks, the earth, the water, and the air. We make connection using all these elements within that inipi. The fire is a very important part because it is representative of the Wakiya, as well as the sun, the energy of the sun, the heat, radiation. It is important to our way of life, especially Unchimoka needs these elements to help nurture our way of life on this earth. And so Inipi brings that back. It makes all the connection. And that's a reminder of who we are when we were underground in the Black Hills, as a spirit, as a Oguligile, or as a Wigiligila, as that's what we were, or Pteriate at one time, until before we came into this physical world. And so it's a process, a slow process, even though when we're within the realm of the spirits under the Black Hills. And It's a slow process, the beginning of changes that would happen. So the Spirit knew that, so they continually addressed how we will continue as a spirit of people when we become physical being. And so the lodge was shown to the Lakota people, how to make a lodge, inipi, how to do that, so that our spirit can become present within the spiritual being, or closest to them, and called today we call inipi, or purification, sweat, or a lot of things. Inikaha, or inipi, or aileapi, or other ways of describing that. Especially in 1835, when the offensive law, the act was passed by the Bureau, and a lot of our way of life ceremony went underground from there. And so they do need to, when they're going to have a sweat, they have to use a different way of when they're going to do the sweat lodge or purification. Inipi or aile yonktelo or apongich yonktelo. There are certain words to describe inipi so that the police wouldn't, if we say we're going to have an inikarapi, then the police will come over, so we do need to disguise and describe inipi in inikarapi in different way, like Makola Ron is saying, apoikich yaktelo, or aile yaktelo, or timuki yaktelo. In other words, that so that the continuation of the spirituality connection will be done in a way, in a secret way, because they usually do have the ceremonies in a deep ravine where it's the access to it would be difficult for the persons who are outlawing this ritual. It went throughout the whole world. This offensive law in 1835 or 1833, as I remembered. And so throughout the whole world, this it impacts the ceremonies of the people of this land. Okay. And so it is until 1979 we began to practice. So it's a very long time to do things underground, and yet it doesn't hurt the spirituality of Lakota people. Because I remember it's a deep ravine where Grandpa and them have their ceremonies, and us Hakojas would stay on top to see if anybody is coming, and so during that time, in the 50s, or when I was growing up, it's still there. The fear of being imprisoned is still there. Usually, when you practice your ceremonies, you will be caught and land in Canton, South Dakota, as a mental institution for any infraction on the way of life of the Lakota people, especially during ceremonies or other activities of, renewing their spiritual way. And the other one is Deadwood. They usually sent them over there for a year and a day. So it is very hard, but somehow we survived that onslaught of the government regulation or the BIA. And now today we are doing and bring some of this back to the Lakota people here. In fact, throughout the whole nation here. And so we could easily sort of reconnect ourselves once again as our ancestors have done throughout those years that we lost. We came out of our call eve of destruction. We are the survivors of that, the destruction of a way of life, and we survived that. And so we need to understand and how to do these things, not as our ancestor did, because we're in a modern time. And the time is the element, or the time is the one that control our way of life, and how to make that time available for ourselves to do at least some of these ceremonies that we have, in order for us as individuals to survive with our siblings or with our children. And we do need to have that time and understand our ceremonies. And some of them are simple, but it's up to the individual how to create a ritual. You can make it difficult, or you make it simple ceremony. And we do have some ceremonies that are very simple, that the head of the family or the elderly would do to preserve our way of life, or energize our. In scientific world, they say we're made out of molecules, to strengthen that and to have every molecule in place so that we can easily reminds us that who we are as individual and how we could help others in their life as they progress into a new way of life, and yet maintain that spiritual strength by having our connection with our ceremonies. And so keeping of the spirit and releasing of the spirit is one part that will really help the individual and the family and the Tioshpai how to continue without that person, knowing that he's in the spirit world, and also believe that the connection with them is still with us, as how we dispose the body of that person. And also inipi is that, we no.
When they were sending them to like Canton,
Uh-huh.
what was the whole reason behind that?
Like I said, the offensive law that was enacted in 1835, every ceremony of Lakota people should be outlawed. And the churches were sent just to do that, dispirit the Lakota people so they could easily sign away their land by the government. And so the churches came in, and they did a good job, converting a lot of us into Christianity. And so if they don't do that, BIA is backing them, so if the priest or whoever found out that this one is doing inipi or other ceremony, they report it and they would take and send them to jail 1 year. First 4 days that's when they go to those places. And after that, they come back. And then after 4 days, when you bury that, after 4 days, you have to be in a good way. So that obsession of what you're doing you continue that. You stay home, you take care of things, or be nice to somebody after when you bury them, then that should be an obsession during the rest of your life. But some after that, they go travel around and stuff. After 4 days, that's how they are. They never stay home. They just travel, never take care of their homes and stuff, So there are 12 days of mourning if you're not going to keep the spirit of that person. So you have 12 days from the death until then you can have the wiping of tears and go out into the world, so to speak, began to do things. But see, some of us can afford that because it's a hard life of keeping a spirit, So these are things that they do so you can continue right away. And yes, those who drink, alcohol is acquired by tasting, you know. And so once they tasted alcohol, then, you know, it did something to them, and then they continue. But if you talk to an alcoholic, they'll know and understand their spirituality than anybody else. They will know something about Tokashila because they practiced that at one point in their life. It's just that acquired taste of alcohol is needed within the physical body, you know. Just like I like kidneys or meat with a lot of fat on. I know it's not good for me, but every time I go to the store and did and boil and eat that, you know, it's not good for me. But it doesn't affect my spirituality. So those who died of alcoholism in the physical body, their spirituality is still intact. So they know what to do. I think more than most of us. And so, yeah, it is hard, the alcohol that takes that person, but maybe they already know that I'm going to die when I do this. And so within a period of, you know, sobering up, they may pray. And some they get so that they need to die, you know, they wanted to die because they cannot control that liquid that controls the physical body needs, you know. So in order to drink more, the tolerate might be up or whatever, as the alcoholic counselor is always talking about, you know. Toleration, if it's high, you drink more, or if it's low, I don't know which one it is, but yeah, so we can blame that. We can blame that because that's alcohol is a good thing to blame on somebody, you know. And that keeps us saying that, okay, he died of alcohol, cirrhosis, you know. So, like you said, you're doing okay, you prayed for them, and that's good. And sometimes we just sit there and blame the alcohol rather than pray for them, you know, to boost their spirituality up so they continue into the spiritual world in a good way. Yeah, so it is that. And those who died in a tragic way, they do come back. If a blood is spilled, they come back. They stay there until somebody reacts to it and do a little ceremony for them. All you have to do is boil sage, and as one prays, you pour and get a bunch of sage or with sweet grass in it, and then wipe that blood off. And that's it. And they should be able to continue into the spirit world, or if they come back and stay here, that will help them back into the spirit trailer once again. And usually they have a ceremony to ask the spirit if that person gets into the spirit world. If not, they would ask them to help them into the spirit world. And so those are things that Lakota people always do in their lifetime, you know. So, because even in battles, you know, if you kill somebody and blood spill, you cannot go back into the camp. Usually they paint their face black, and their kolas would bring the horses inside and tell them what happened. By that time, the women, the cousins, sisters would go out and meet this person who killed somebody and wipe the face off, the paint, black paint, and take him to Inipi, and then put new clothes on him and bring him into the Tioshpai, or the campground, you know. In the meanwhile, his friends will really saying he's a hero, he did this, and sometimes they would over-exaggerate. And so when this person is ready to come back, the chief asks him, did you do all this thing? He might say, no, I didn't hand-to-hand combat, it just I shot him, or something in that, to tell the truth. And then he will be brought back into the family once again. Because they said if you kill somebody, your uh, you're not as person as you are. You're dirty, you know, because knowing that the spirit in that person, yet you did that, because it's, even though it's his job to do that, you know, but you have to go through a cleansing thing, you know, a shapa, or you know, if you shake hands with somebody without doing that, you're making that person dirty. So usually when somebody spills blood, they stay away from him. A little bit ostracize them in that sense, you know. So there's things that... yeah. Yeah, they should do that, or maybe they have done that. See, they go to war, they were brainwashed to kill, but when they come back, they should go through that ritual to cleanse themselves. A long time ago, when World War I, when they come back, nobody hardly shake their hand, just immediate family. Until they went through that ritual, then you can shake their hand, hug them, or whatever it is. So even though it's they're trained to do that, yet they still have to come back to the family.